I'd like to call the February 3rd, 9 a.m. Planning Board regular meeting to order. We could stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Amen.
Before we go to our amend or approval of the agenda, I'd like to welcome our two new planning board members, Richard Dysinger on my left, and Jerry, is it Burns? Burns on my right. Welcome.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Now we have a full 5-member planning board, which we haven't had for a little while. So that's exciting. Looking at our agenda for today's meeting, does anyone have any amendments or additions, deletions from that agenda?
Not a material change. I was just wondering, is Kelly Stewart, is that not the wrong spelling of her name?
Those are in the minutes. I'm looking at the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jumped ahead. I was so focused on it.
Well, you and I were just discussing the agenda for the minutes. Any additions or deletions from the existing agenda?
No.
I'd like to hear a motion that we accept the agenda as submitted.
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is therefore, a packet is approved as submitted. The second item, or item number 3, is the selection of chairman and vice chairman. For those citizens that are viewing YouTube today, we lost our chairman, a dear friend, Tom Vincez, several months ago. And Tom was the chair of the planning board. In order to keep moving forward, I agreed and was nominated and appointed to act as temporary chair of the planning board until such time as we filled the board completely with our 5 members, as is listed in the UDO, with 4 members and 1 from the ETJ. And Ron LeBruno agreed to be vice chair during this time until we filled all the seats. So at today's meeting, we are here to discuss and determine designated chairman and vice chair for the planning board. And Chad, is this a 1-year situation, or how do we deal with the term of service?
It states that I've read that it will go for a year.
Okay.
And if we want to stick to that, we can.
Okay.
So
I'd be in favor of that.
So at the beginning of every year, January, February, I'll
Yes.
put on the agenda that we discuss this.
We'll revisit it. Okay. Any comments, any discussion about chair and vice chair selections? Any candidates? Any people want to put their hand up to be chair or vice chair? I guess we'll deal with chair first. But
Well, I'm going to suggest that, Pete, you put your hand up.
I'd be happy to accept the appointment of chair of the planning board, which would run through the year 2022. But you folks need to make a motion, and it needs to be
I
seconded.
make a motion that we keep Pete on as the chairperson of this committee.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Vice chair. The vice chair's responsibilities are the same as the chairperson. However, typically they are not launched into that role until the chair is either not at a meeting or can't, for some reason, fulfill that duty. Is anybody willing, and everybody here is capable of being vice chair? And just because you're new doesn't mean you can't be. Ron was our vice chair.
Interim.
Interim.
Well, not wanting to be the one to, on my first day, volunteer 2 people, but I think the person with the most experience on the board should perhaps be vice chairman, so I'm going to.
That would be Sybil.
My understanding is because she's county appointed, she
Cumulatively, you are, right?
cannot
beg
be
your
vice.
Cumulative, you have more years.
I just,
Because you,
no,
And the ETJ representative can be chair and vice
yeah,
board
I
vice
already
chair.
okay.
tried that excuse. It didn't work.
I mean,
Ron, I think you've done an excellent job.
I haven't done anything. Just sit here.
Well, and it's for a year, and then we get to know our new members better. And
You have a day off coming, right?
my
I just want to make sure I'm going to be here then.
I'm
my
missing the next meeting, yes.
my only covenant, my only statement of this is if the vice chair, it would be somebody who would be comfortable running the meeting with
Yeah.
Robert Rules of Order in a situation where the chair cannot be here. So
Right. So you're off the March 1st meeting.
Yes, I will not be here
I
for our
should I
next.
should be here. So
Okay.
Next meeting being the February 16th meeting,
well, the
or
regular
no.
meeting is the first.
the March meeting.
First Thursday of each month,
be
Okay,
the
great.
first.
morning.
Yeah, that's fine.
You want to make that motion?
The motion being that we're nominating
Ron,
Ron for vice chair. I so move.
I second.
Second from Sybil. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a statement, and it goes to what Chad just said about Robert's rules. And I think it's particularly important for us, even the people that have been on the board, but even more so for the new members that are joining us today. The orderly communication up here on the dais during these board meetings is really key. It's key to each of us understanding and hearing the sometimes complex situations that we're dealing with. And equally as important for our audience, the citizens, to be able to understand what we're talking about. And Tom Vincez did a very good job of giving each of us our opportunity to ask questions, to provide our input. And we work hard in putting together and evaluating these packets before our meetings. So we certainly want to get our input heard and discussed in an orderly process. I'm a violator of this. I will admit I'm going to do my best to not be a violator in the future. But it's talking over other people, or when one person has the floor, somebody else inserting a comment that may be very timely and prudent. However, it breaks the thought pattern of the person giving that presentation, whether it's a board member or whether it's an applicant standing up at the podium who probably is very nervous. So I'd like to suggest, and even more than suggest, I'd like to submit that we not talk over each other. We not interrupt presentations. If let's say Sybil is talking and I want to insert something, I'm going to put my hand up and I'm going to let the chair recognize me. Obviously, I can't recognize myself, but I want Sybil to know that I have something that I'd like to input when she has a break point, and I'm not taking the floor away from her. And then similarly, when Sybil is finished with her comments, we then proceed in an orderly fashion around the dais so that everybody gets their chance to speak. Again, I know I'm a violator of this. I'm going to work hard. I think if we watch the YouTubes in the past, we will see that we do that quite a bit, step on each other. So that just my 2 cents worth, particularly for the newer members. All right, congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Congratulations again. Don't take too many vacations.
Unless it's on a motorcycle, I don't typically do that, although this is a ski trip. Public comments is our item number 4 in the agenda, and seeing that we don't have any public comments, Dustin, our Department of Public Works manager, department head, is in the audience. Any comments from you? You're obviously a citizen, so could make them. Seeing none, we'll proceed on to consideration of approval of minutes for the January 6th, 2022 Planning Board meeting. Any comments from the dais? Starting over here with Richard.
Yeah, I just had 2 questions, and this process is a little new to me. So, I mean, minutes to some extent are just a reflection of what's happened. My first concern is are we going to get more clarification from Riptide in terms of their promise to provide amenities in?
Richard, if I might,
Yeah.
all we're doing is reviewing the
Okay.
written minutes themselves as opposed to getting into
The issues engaged? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
then-
But if there's a misstatement or if something that was excluded or included improperly, that's what we're really dealing with in
Okay.
the minutes.
Great.
Ron?
Nothing material. I just was wondering. I thought the Stewarts were spelled different, but is that right for Kelly's last name? I mean, they didn't spell their name. Are they Stuart? But it may not be relevant to the minutes on proper spelling of public's name because they don't spell their names.
I'm not sure.
I'm trying to think of their signs that are all over the place. But if she was here, she could defend herself, I guess. But matter of the record, I'm not sure on the spelling. But that's just
It is Stuart for Kelly Stewart. Thank you.
I thought Sybil had a couple things or something.
Sybil?
No, mine was not in the minutes. It's a question in another section. Sorry. Thank
I
you.
had one point that Katie and I discussed prior to the meeting, and I like the idea that what the town administrator said about us getting the minutes in advance of the meeting, so that individually, so that we can provide our comments at that time, send them back to Katie. Katie and the town administrator and Chad can look at our comments and decide which ones are appropriate to change. So when the agenda packet comes out that we get prior to this meeting, those revisions will already be input, and we won't be spending an inordinate amount of time talking about details. But the one item I have is on page 4, Katie, and it's the last line of the minutes for January 6th, and it's the continuation into January 13th. And it says a continuation meeting on January 13th was closed at 9:45 a.m. Really should be adjourned, and it was adjourned by a unanimous vote. I have some other things, but they're housekeeping, not of any import. And
I don't have anything.
Jerry?
No, sir.
Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the minutes as amended in our conversation with just the two items, Kelly Stewart's name and the word adjourned added.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I did.
Yes. Yes.
Didn't hear him.
Going on to old business. Article 11, sign regulation ordinance amendment consideration. Chad, you want to start that conversation?
Yeah, I want to bring everybody up to speed on this. Bill Clark Holmes was the initial applicant on this. After the last meeting, it definitely, with the public comment and the agreeance that the planning board decided to move into, is to take the time and move what is best, particularly maybe for Sunset Beach and the non-residential structures and residential zoning districts. And we ended up, I left Bill Clark in as the original applicant. Sunset Beach has decided to take the planning board directed staff to look further into this. And it is both, I would consider this now a citizen initiated and now a town initiated, kind of jointly. We have refunded Bill Clark their money for this. And it's probably going to act as more of a town initiated text amendment more than a citizen, but a citizen was the original one that brought this forward. As this unified development ordinance is currently written, signs in residential zoning districts are limited to monument signs for subdivision entrances and residential wall signs up to 2 square feet. Text amendment would allow for signs in non-residential uses in residential zoning districts. The monument sign would not exceed 64 square feet in area and 6 feet in height and must meet the landscape requirements for each. At the January 6, 2022 Planning Board meeting, the Planning Board tabled this text amendment to be brought back at the February 3rd, 2022 meeting, gave staff direction to review the current UDO on how to enhance sign regulations for all subdivisions in Sunset Beach. Staff research conversations and keeping in harmony with residential zoning districts has brought forward to allow one monument sign per non-residential use in a residential zoning district. During those conversations with developers and research gathered while driving around other residential neighbor communities in Brunswick County, I'll get into that in a second, staff found that a combination of monument signs were constructed along with supplementation of directional signs in residential neighborhoods and subdivisions. The other thing I want to get into is the definition of a sign, and as soon as I can pull that up, I will read that because I think it's going to help
From the UDO.
from the UDO, because I think it's going to help the point that Pete brought up at the last meeting. Is the sign area limited to, the way I read it, interpret it, just the lettering, or the whole entire sign overall? So a sign, according to our definition inside the UDO, is any words, lettering, figures, numerals, emblems, devices, trademarks, or trade names, or combination of thereof, by which anything is made known as the designation of an individual, firm, corporation, profession, business, camaraderie, or product, which is designated to attract attention or convey a message. Couple of the subdivisions I wrote into in Brunswick County, one being Winding River, which is home is Carolina National Golf Course, Brunswick Forest, and Magnolia Greens, all have monument signs for their amenities, and smaller subdivisions inside a bigger subdivision. And they also use the supplement that with directional signs. Right now, the ordinance has a allowance for 4 square feet in area for traffic directional signs. And talking to one of the developers, they had the wish list of upgrading that to 12. They're currently in the works of trying to enhance that and going forward. So I'm interested to see what this looks like for the planning board in the discussion today. And the overall kind of general idea of what they would want.
Can you define for us what the directional means? Is it saying, here's an arrow pointing to the swimming pool, or does it mean this is a rental property?
I'm going to use the biggest one we have in our town as an example. It would be a directional sign to a clubhouse, amenity center such as the MAC, the VAC, the Pink Palace, maybe a subdivision within a subdivision such as Eastwood Bluffs or Birdwatch or Gulls Landing or Pelican Reserve, or those type entities as well. I think that's the one we are looking the hard at to, because it's the most unique and complex in our town, and then allowing something that would fit in a box. And I know that Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to the chair with any kind of comments and questions of how we kind of resolve this moving forward.
Thank you. I just have a couple of comments. Chad and I have gone back and forth with this 64 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see something in the ordinance that is very clear, that says if it is our intention that a 64 square foot footprint or face area for lettering, logos, or whatever that may be, and not the outside of the monument and its architecture, then I think we need to say that very clearly, that it is the substance of the lettering and the logos on the sign, and it is that the overall monument can be bigger. I'd also like to define that too. But
yeah, and that's where the 64 square feet in area, the 14 feet in length, and then the 6 feet in height. So if you go 14 by 16,
it's 84.
It's 84. And then you have 64 square feet of lettering. And the way I define that and the way staff interprets that is by the definition of any words, lettering, figures, numerals, emblems, devices, trademarks, or trade names, or combination of thereof would be that.
Could you please restate that for my benefit at least?
Sure.
Are you saying that 64 square feet is the area of lettering and logos, but that the overall monument can't be any longer than 14 foot and can't be any taller than 6 foot,
Correct.
which is 84 square feet.
Correct.
I think it needs to be stated more clearly.
Okay, I can do that.
The one comment I had, and it has to do with our existing UDO, and this would be on packet page 9 at the very top, where the sentence, it's in the middle of the sentence, it says allows one monument sign per non-residential use. That, in my interpretation, says that if a subdivision has a swimming pool here and a tennis court over here and a community center here, that they can really put 3, because those are 3 non-residential uses, and you're allowed a sign for each per non-residential use.
And this is why I'm glad we're going to have these conversations today, is to pick up kind of the in-betweens, because my intent with that, with the use, is going to be use per property. Because when you look at somebody bringing in something, as we'll see later on today with a retail center, that is one use on one piece of property, even though it's going to have potentially 3 individual tenants in it. So if you want me to put in there use or per property, I can look at that.
I might submit that under the suggested revisions in red under 11.18A as an apple, that on the last line under permitted, it says permitted within a subdivision. It says one additional monument sign may be permitted within a subdivision in accordance with the size and landscape requirements provided herein. Now that's telling them that they can only have one sign interior to the, except for entrance signs, because we only address entrance signs right now.
Okay, so let me bring this up, because this was I think the intention we had with the last one, and I want to make sure we're clear on this. Bear with me. The draft ordinance for the first one was one additional monument sign may be permitted in accordance with size and landscaping requirements provided herein with an amenity or recreational area of a subdivision or planned community. In no case shall any one subdivision or planned community have more than one such monument sign. Is that what you're saying?
That's what you had in the
In
prior,
the first one, in the January.
in the last meeting.
Correct. I am now allowing, having a language in here that would allow a monument sign per non-residential use in a residential zoning district.
But I don't think it says that. I
Okay.
agree with
Okay.
Pete. My recommendation, let's set the size thing up. I have separate issues with the size things. But my thought was, after the word, in the first red line, additional monument plan, I was going to insert per each one additional non-residential facility.
Okay.
Please explain.
That would
You're
give,
allowing multiple
that would
signs?
give that would give the development one additional sign per facility. If you have a tennis court that's separate from your swimming pool, separate from your clubhouse, you could have 3 more signs.
Okay.
Okay, monument signs. That means they're on the ground. So I mean, if you only, the way it's written now, I agree with Pete that it only allows them one additional total.
Okay.
The way it's written now, it's one additional monument sign may be permitted. What I'm saying is, by adding there per one additional non-residential facility, such as you have a development that has one clubhouse that has their tennis court, pool, and clubhouse all in one sign works. But if there are diverse positions in the development, if you have a pool and then a pickleball court over on the other side, you need 2. So that gives them the opportunity to do one sign per non-residential facility.
Okay. So maybe it should read something is that one monument sign may be allowed
Per use.
for non-residential
per each one
use.
additional non-residential facility.
Okay.
Is the
All
way I wrote it.
So
So you had your hand up
No,
next.
go ahead, Sybil. I'm sorry.
I satisfied my
So
question.
in my mind, and I guess anyone can challenge me, that means a development can have 2 monument signs at each entrance and 1 monument sign at each, whatever you want to call it, support facility. Uh, it's not a residence.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
the way
non-residential
I'm
use.
envisioning. If they have whether it's the mailbox kiosk, the pickleball court, the pool, if they
Well,
separate all these, you
and
can end up with a pile of these, but any additional facility has 1.
Chad, can you address that, and then we'll go to you,
yeah,
Richard.
and,
Yeah,
and
go ahead,
I'm-
Chad.
And I apologize for violating our new rule of not interrupting anybody, but I might be worse than Pete with this one. But it's got to be a non-residential use defined in our Article 6 table of uses. I want to point that out, and that's what we're having. That's how I base the non-residential uses on is our table of uses provided in Article 6. So if it's every park bench inside a subdivision
Is
is
pickleball in our? I bet it
I
ain't.
don't. It's going to be a kind of a recreational use type thing, and it's going to be per use per property, that type thing. So there are, and when you get into shopping centers and stuff like that, they have their own kind of standard uses for signs. And I'm not trying to muddy the waters or confuse anybody.
But here we're talking about residential.
We are.
We're not talking about a commercial development.
Correct. But I think yes. So, but if you look at, for example, I think you have some examples of this in Sea Trail that you have recreational uses such that has swimming pools and tennis courts. 1 monument sign would be allowed for that facility.
Because it's a facility.
That's my intent.
Right.
It's for the
But
facility.
if you have separate geographical
Yes,
locations,
if they're on separate pieces of property and stuff like that, yes. I
I'm-
don't think we have that.
I'm going to submit that I'm going to go back to what Ron just said, that putting the size of the sign and the dimensions, putting that aside. I'd like to address that first and get the opinions of the panel as to how big a sign should be. And then I'd like us to address whether, and I think it's simple, we either want staff to go back and I think they need to rewrite this, to either allow 1 or multiple signs within a subdivision if, in fact, there are multiple locations for various facilities.
I want to say this before we deliberate, and maybe this will help the board. Yes, that is my intention to allow multiple monument signs per subdivision, per planned community, for each non-residential use inside a residential subdivision.
Okay.
Um,
We need to decide then if that is, in fact, what is
yes.
written here. Sybil?
Yes.
What I was going to say is, what about things like where they have different condo sections? Is that included? Like this is the John Jones townhouses, and this is the. Is that
Those are
included?
directional signs.
That's directional.
Yes,
Yeah.
I believe that is directional. That's
Well,
why I asked for the clarification.
I think what Sybil might refer to is this is allowed technically by the rules of a UDO, is that you have bird watch, for example, and I know that Sea Trail is the one we use because it's the most unique and the biggest one we have.
the
but
most nonconformance.
And I wouldn't say that, but you have bird watch. It was a separate subdivision within a subdivision. Our ordinance allows for them to have a sign. Eastwood Bluffs, subdivision within a subdivision, allowed to have a sign. And all these, but I think that's what Sybil is referring to, as that would not be a directional sign.
Okay, sorry.
So, yeah.
Okay.
But Mr. Dysinger.
It was kind of traveled off to one of the issues that we're going to deal with the UDO is a more grander overview, which is how do we encourage quote unquote mixed use development in residential communities. So perfect example is the house in Sea Trail, a commercial entity within a residential community. How do we give that business the opportunity to create signage that's consistent
Yes.
with the um, overall look of the area, and because that's a non-residential use, but I think it's different than, okay, we want people to have signs so they know where the pickleball court is. And I'm not sure that this, the way it's written, addresses that and makes that distinction. The second thing, and this gets a little more complicated, is that Sea Trails is a perfect example. When Sea Trails was built, the signage in that community had a very specific and particular look. The stop signs, the street signs, and all of it lended to the ambience of the facility. I don't know if there's a way to encourage or embed, because one of the things that's happening now that the roads are public within Sea Trails, rather than having these nice crafted stop signs, it's just poof, a good old octagon red stop sign, and frankly, it doesn't look as nice. So I don't know if there's a way to embed that in this signage language, that I want a developer to be able to create a brand within their development, and signage is the way they're going to do it. So those are my comments.
Richard, if I might, there are certain things that we can do on public roads and certain things we can't do.
Right, yeah.
We can have I don't want to say cutesy, but we can have a architecturally pleasing stop sign or
Right.
yield sign or crosswalk sign if it's a private road.
Right.
But as soon as we
Oh, I
make it
know.
public, we are mandated by the DOT to have a certain size, a certain look, a certain shape, a certain color. It can't even be a shade off. So I think that's kind of taken out of our hands. I
Right.
agree, but
Well, I'm more concerned about, I mean, that ship has sailed as far as Sea Trails is concerned because of the transition of the roads. But in terms of new developments that are going to come here and ask for guidance in terms of signage, I think it's something that if we get ahead of, we can, get a more pleasing ambient environment within these communities that supports both the non-residential use and the hopeful commercial use within the development.
I think you bring up
we're
2
fortunate to
points.
have Dustin Graham here, our Department of Public
Yeah.
Works manager, department head, because he's the one that puts up those DOT signs.
I think you bring up 2 points. And one, with conversations with a couple developers, try to help them come up with the branding, as you see in other developments around Brunswick County, for their monument signs and their directional signs. The other point I want to make is that this ordinance, the way it was written in 2012, did not do anybody any favors as trying to understand non-residential and residential when it comes to signs, because it separates it out. It separates it out as you are either a use in a residential area or a use in a non-residential area. Didn't really allow for much overlapping there, and now you see allowance for a few, not many, non-residential uses in residential zoning districts that are really, really constricted by the ordinances that we have for signs for those entities. I'm trying to enhance that to where it is fair for those non-residential uses in those residential zoning districts, with also keeping the intent of they're in a residential area as well and keeping the harmony at that. So this has been, in my mind, should have been easy, but it's very complex and complicated.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
Ron, if I could get you to repeat your version of this.
Well, my wording would be your wording for. I'm going to go from
Where are you reading from, please?
page 2, packet 9, section 11.8, paragraph A. Your wording currently, right of the colon, says one additional monument sign may be permitted, etc. I would alter that to be one additional monument sign per each one additional non-residential facility may be permitted in accordance with the size and landscaping requirements provided herein.
Would
So
you?
I would insert after the word sign, everybody else might not, per each one additional non-residential facility. Per each one additional non-residential facility, in between the word sign and may. As a caret there. I think
Okay.
those are called carets, right?
All right. Okay.
So I guess the question is, maybe you, by using the word facility, does that, in our rest of our definitions, I know we have a definition of facility, does that then make it what we're thinking it does, that a facility could be a single use or multiple uses as long as it's on like one parcel?
Let me throw a spitball into that. Richard just brought up the point about House, the restaurant that's at the Village Activity Center, the VAC. You could make the argument that that is one facility, the restaurant, the pool, the workout room, because it is one building, one structure, one footprint. But I think we would all agree that there are really two different uses. One is a restaurant, and one is a swimming pool and workout facility. So I think you're bringing up an excellent point as to whether we're talking about one structure or multiple uses within that structure. And that is difficult to get our arms around.
Yeah, and I just looked in our definitions. We don't have a definition. I think this is the key point here. We don't have a definition for use or non-residential use or
Right,
residential
I looked
use.
and we do not, yes.
Now, the way I view a use as is each defined use in our table of uses. And that's what I'll have to see how I can clarify to make sure, come back with this with use and facility being one and the same.
Could we
I
make a
think
distinction?
Sybil had her hand up here. If she
Yeah.
could
I
finish
have, because I really wanted to say something for that. I understand the one facility with all of the things in it, but if you think about the sign that's there, doesn't it list the name of the facility and then the three things that are in it? So wouldn't that be allowable?
as long
It's
as
one sign.
As long as it's within that 64 square feet or that
Yeah.
allowable square foot area.
It's not a very obtrusive sign, I don't think.
Because what we don't, Richard.
Yeah, I think what I think is an important distinction here is that there are going to be non-residential facilities that are specifically for the use of residents.
Yeah.
And there are going to be non-residential uses that are commercial enterprises. And I think we need to create, because in your point, to have a sign that says, okay, for instance, the VAC, it's got a restaurant, it's got a gaming room, it's got an indoor pool, isn't going to satisfy the legitimate needs of the business owner who wants to have a sign that promotes his business, so people know where it is, can make the left-hand turn off of whatever road that it's on and go back to get to it. So is there perhaps a way to create a definition that separates non-residential use for the purpose of the residents, which would cover clubhouses, pickleballs, etc., and any commercial use that is open to all? So for instance, Magnolia used to be a restaurant and they got a big sign out front, hey, public is invited. How do we make that distinction? Because we want to give businesses within the residential community an opportunity to succeed, which is going to rely on them having a sign so people know where they are.
I don't think
Can
we
you
can.
respond? And then Ron had his
and
hand
I do
up.
want to respond before Ron. I don't think you can for two reasons. One, they're built to commercial standards. When you build such as a swimming pool and all that, the restaurant, they're built to those standards in the commercial code book, not the residential code book. And two, when you get into the table of uses in Article 6 in the UDO, it lists them both as non-residential uses specifically in there. If the top part of that table is for residential uses, it goes down to the bottom and you have non-residential uses. I don't think we should be separating them because they're built to non-residential use standards, in my opinion.
Ron?
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, in that case, doesn't that structure get up to 2 wall signs also?
Yes, to not exceed.
Yeah.
The very small ones, the 2
Very
4
8
small
square
ones.
foot.
Yeah.
Yep.
But they get 2 wall signs also.
Yes.
So the multi-use facility would get a monument sign
Hmm.
that says the multiple uses.
Yep.
And if there's a commercial business, a restaurant or a general store,
They would get
they would get 2 wall signs also.
not exceeding the square feet.
Right.
And yes.
Again, barring this, forgetting the size thing at the moment.
Yep.
To me, that seems fair and sufficient.
Well, my only
Right.
point would be, and again, this is specific to the house, is that building is back off, and literally it's on a parking lot.
Hmm.
So if you have a sign on the building, anybody that's driving by is not going to know that that restaurant is in there.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's where the intention comes into Part B with this. When you look at in section 11.3, I know we got a little bit out of that because I'm jumping from 11.8 to 11.3, so we're going backwards.
Direction.
Signs exempting permitted regulations, traffic directional signs provided that signs no greater than 12 square feet in area are limited to 5 feet in height above adjacent grade. And exceeding that 4 square feet to 12 will allow for somebody coming into a community, for somebody to look at a sign and say, hey, this is to your right coming up, this is to your left coming up. I've driven around with a developer that wants to enhance the signs to make it look that so they can help that part. And they have some allowable square footage that exists now, but enhancing the branding, as you might say, of what they want to do, they need some help to allow for
Is
some
that why
extra
you made them bigger?
Yes.
Here? Okay.
That is why I made
that
them
was gonna
bigger.
be my question.
Yep.
So we would, sorry.
No, you got it.
So we might address this by allowing somewhat larger directional signs based on a commercial use. So now, for instance, the house could stick a sign out. I've driven on that road 1,000 times. I don't know the name of it. That would allow it to provide
Clubhouse.
directional information that says, "Hey, make a right here, and the house restaurant is at the end of this."
I don't want to confuse, say you have an Applebee's in a subdivision. I don't want to say Applebee's gets another sign advertisement for that turn here, but the developer, as far as directing people inside that, can just put that, can put clubhouse, can put restaurant, can put whatever A to Z company they might have, and direct them to. It's just an extra thing. And I think when I rode into Winding River last Friday on my way back from Southport to here, I saw that, and it really enhanced the community because these communities like this are not small.
Right.
The one I think I really wanted to ride into was St. James, but St. James is gated, and I didn't have access into it.
They let you in.
Not for that, I don't think.
If you're with a real estate
You
agent.
just go to the front of the town what you're there
Yeah.
for.
Are you saying that we could have a sign that said gas station then too? That fits your thought process?
If there was a gas station within that, I mean, and again, I'm not saying I'm allowing a gas station in a residential neighborhood or zoning district, but that's where the table of uses comes into play. I didn't put the table of uses in here, but just know that the table of uses comes into play for allowance of that entity in that zoning district. So
Does the board feel, and Richard, I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, I'm and again, as a neophyte here, it feels to me like we're trying to create something granular that perhaps is only going to be solved by doing it more holistically in terms of rewriting the UDO and Section 6.
well, and we are going to rewrite the UDO. I'm trying not to keep it simple, as
Right.
we might get more complex into this over the next.
Perhaps,
coming
again, perhaps this is something that we could point first in terms, because I have no idea how we're going to, we're going to start at the beginning and go to the end. I mean,
We are. Yeah, it's going to take us a while to get here.
I know.
Here's a comment. I noted in the packet that Bill Clark Homes, or whoever submitted the initial,
They were Bill
item,
Clark, yes.
had very specific dimensions. The sign that they were contemplating was 45 foot wide,
Yep.
was
6
4,
feet.
4 foot 4 inches tall. And so obviously the 45 foot violates even what we're contemplating now, which is a 14-foot sign. We also need to realize that the nonconformancies that we see within the town already, the entrances to Sea Trail, obviously those monuments are more than 14 foot left to right.
Right.
So
But this is where we get into, what we're getting into now, the elevation view of the structure of the sign and the text of the sign, which is where you started.
well, but
Because I think
I'm expecting
he
wording to come
said
back that
the
clarifies that.
sanctuary word wouldn't be longer than the 14 feet. They were building like a little wall, like a retaining wall. And in the middle, I don't know, maybe not in the middle, but I thought he said the text wouldn't be any more than that 14 feet. The little wall that I think he said was kind of curved.
Yeah, so the
So now we're into the elevation view of the monument and the sign, as Chad said, and I'm reading it doesn't. I don't think it's absolutely clear that means that's the text. So I think we need to clear that up.
He is
It's
going to
where you
clarify it.
started.
Yep.
That there's two separate issues: the size of the structure, the monument, and then the size of the text. And I'm not sure. And we already violate. If you read our monument sign definition, we have a definition of monument sign, directional sign in here, and it doesn't match our other, because it says here it has to be 2/3. The height has to be 2/3 of the horizontal width, and that's not even our 9 by 14 number, I don't think. Or our 6 by 14 is not 2/3.
Yeah.
9 would be. So I guess now I'm in my head where you started is, do we have to define? I'm thinking we get out of the defining of the structure of the sign. I don't care. Do we really care whether the bricks are big?
Let's ask
Or
that
little.
question. Let's ask that
Do we
question
care?
of staff. Do you care how big the outside welcome sign is for the sanctuary on each side of that street on Seaside? Do you care how big the whole monument is, or do we just care about how big the lettering and logo portion of it is? I'm asking that question because the way you word something here is going to reflect what you care about.
Dustin appears to have some input too.
I care when you look
That's a
at.
no.
I think there needs to be regulations on both.
I agree.
All right, there needs to be the size regulation
For the whole thing.
for the whole thing, which would be the 84 square feet.
And may I interject?
Please.
What this just made me think of, if you've ever gone down 904 and a development that was started, but it never came to anything, it has that huge,
Taj Mahal thing.
yes. And
Yeah.
we don't want to end up there.
Right.
I mean, somebody thought that was great.
I think you bring it on a good point. I think I do. I care about both, and I think they have to be looked at. Let's look at the 84 square feet first. Let's look at that. I think that's a good. I mean, that's what our ordinance lays out now. 84 square feet in total size. You have to take away what Sea Trail has because those were built in the 90s. They're non-conforming.
Mhm.
They enhance them to not expand. And you can do that with a non-conforming structure.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing as an old set of stairs on an old beach house. And they're dilapidating. Well, they have the right to bring them back up to code in that exact same
As
footprint.
long as they're not replacing
long
more
as
than
they're-
51% of the
Correct.
structure.
And they're not expanding it. I think you have to look at that, especially when you're looking at entrance, because you don't want to build, I don't want to quote our latest president, a wall where you can't see to get out of the subdivision. And I think that's important.
What are you going to come back to us with here?
I think
Because I think 84 square feet is probably too small, too limiting for the overall size of the monument.
Where are we getting the
Entrance
84
monument, yeah.
from?
I think that
Well, our thing says 84 square feet.
entrance signs, and I think with monument signs,
I'm sorry, 14 by.
I think
6.
I just want to have the conversation on the square footage part real quick, because if there's anything that goes back to the initiated text amendment part, this is it. And I think if we lower in any way, it takes away the intention that Bill Clark had when they applied for this. and that is the 84 square feet and the 64 square feet of allowed lettering on the
I'm
sign.
going to disagree because their letter says that they want it to be 45 foot long
Okay.
by 4 foot 4 inches high, or 52
yes.
inches high.
But and maybe I needed to put this email in here, when I came up with this language, and I made a point before I put this in the agenda packet in January, when I sent this to the engineer, Paramount Engineering, who was representing Bill Clark, they were the ones that read this and said, yes, this meets the intentions of what we want to do.
So their email of December 8th is out of play then now.
It's in play because I wanted to include the conversations that I had with them, but more importantly, the pictures that were in that. Wanted to see kind of the examples of what they were looking to do with that. There's just they have an amenity center with a swimming pool, and they want to put a sign there to advertise that and the subdivision. And the way our ordinance reads right now, there's no allowance for that. And that's where all this started. So the 84 square feet of a total sign, and I think that's important to limit that, because you don't want to give the free for all of somebody going in there and building as tall and big as
Ron's
they
right,
want
though.
to.
We'd never say 84. We say 14 wide, 6 high.
Correct.
We never mention 84.
Correct.
So
I
that's
think
the monument sign.
That is the
So-
monument sign. If you
But
go
that doesn't
14
agree with our
by,
definition.
and I just realized that, to keep in the consistency, I'm going to have to modify that definition as well. And the 64 square feet would be an allowance of the lettering and advertisement for that sign.
Yeah, do we make a distinction between a monument sign that is an entrance to the development as opposed to monument signs that are within the development? 'Cause
Yes.
It seems to me, I mean, Sea Trails has just redone their monument sign and expanded it significantly.
they didn't expand it. They put
No.
fascia on what was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that is larger than what the original sign was. Can we go back? I mean, I don't, I'm not a big fan of the brick coloring that they chose, but I mean, the sign is well constructed and it looks nice.
Mhm.
But I can see where a developer might come and say, well, listen, Sea Trails has these huge, this is the size of the signs for
They're
Sea Trails.
non-conforming.
Yeah.
So
way-
do we redefine what is conforming based on what's existing and say, okay, here's what Sea Trail has built. You're allowed to build a monument this big with signage of this dimension, and see what places like the sanctuary and future developers come back to us.
No, it's the fortunate situation for Sea Trail where those were built in the 90s under a
Yeah.
different code that was allowed then. And I get that question from a lot of different people. It's like, well, so-and-so down the street got theirs. I'm like, well, so-and-so's down the street could be there for 20 years, and I have no idea what the code was when it was built then. But unfortunately, now the code reads this, and then you have to adhere to this ordinance.
A thought, maybe. Let me throw this out as a thought. For the monument signs, our definition about the height being 2/3 of the width, is that what we got?
Yes.
Yep. It says a freestanding sign
Yeah.
with a base affixed to the ground which measures at least 2/3
Yeah.
of the horizontal length of the
So
sign.
like the Bill Clark one would not conform because it's 45 feet long and not 2/3 the height. And if you did those dimensions, they'd be way over.
Well, the 45-foot.
But maybe let's think about it this way. Obviously, the text can't be any bigger than the monument, right? Physically.
Correct.
So maybe we start from the outside in. What's the maximum size monument we would allow? We like the 84 square feet?
I don't.
Okay. You think the monument, the structure of 84 square feet is too big?
Small.
It's too small. Okay. So let's just throw out a number, 100 square feet is the monument size, and its length has to be, horizontal length has to be greater than its height or something, some language. And then we just say the text on such monument shall be no greater than 75% of the structure, or 66%, or whatever. So,
You're on the exact right track,
well, even a blind squirrel
And-
finds an acorn every now and then.
and a clock is right twice a day.
Good.
I would submit that this is the dimension needs to be something that town staff brings to us. And I say that because I think it's important that developers have input into, particularly where we're at a time right now where we've got uh, uh, primary development going on in the town. They will pick up the phone in a second when Chad calls them up and says, we're dealing with entrance signs and monument signs also for non-residential use. What is the overall size of that monument that you feel is going to achieve what you want to achieve without being gaudy and blocking views? And then I think we've all kind of said that 64 square feet is a good number for the logos and lettering size. But what we've allowed them to do is make that 64 feet by 1 foot. But obviously, if we've defined the overall monument size, it has to fit within that.
Right. In this emails thing, just for reference, they got an 180 square foot monument with 60 square feet of text.
Yeah.
So half. I don't know if it's just by
Well,
luck.
third.
Well,
yeah.
half. Oh, third rather, yeah. Said less. So I don't know. That's what I'm going on. If we define the maximum monument and just say the text can be no bigger than X percentage, or no smaller and no bigger, would that do what we want to do? Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's a rat going down the wrong
I'm
hole.
going to submit this.
Well, I will ask this because this will help staff. If you're happy with the 64 square footage, is that kind of the general consensus?
Do we have a consensus on that for
On
lettering?
the text size.
Text
On the text
lettering,
size?
logo.
What would be a 10-minute conversation of what would you think the maximum area of the sign should be? If 84 is too small.
Probably twice the
Now,
64.
I want to keep in mind the harmony of the residential part of this is because what you could potentially see is per non-residential use. I'm going to use use because that's the word I use with on a daily basis because I look at it as in uses per property. You're going to have a monument sign. You have a string of 10 non-residential uses in a residential zoning area. You could have 10 monument signs domino right down the road, right next to each other. So I want to ask if 84 is too small, what would that number be?
Well, I think if we like the 64 text size, the monument can be at least twice, if not more, the text size. So we're in the 120, 150 foot range. But my next thinking, which I didn't get to, is the other monument signs we're allowing should be X percentage smaller than your entrance one. I don't think we should use the same
Because
size.
this is not for entrance signs. This is
I'm
for,
talking about
okay.
the entrance sign, monument sign, big.
Yeah.
I'm kind of okay with.
Okay.
The ones we're adding per facility, I think should be smaller, should not have the same numbers.
And that's normally the case.
Now, whether we sign a whole bunch of new numbers or we just say it has to be no more
We just
no more
really
than half the allowable entrance
I
size or
quickly
something.
piggybacked off the initial sign regulation there. You got 64 square feet, 14 feet in height, 6 feet, 14 feet in length, 6 feet in height. We just applied that to non-residential signs or monument signs in non-residential areas. I need to separate them out. I'll leave entrance signs kind of where they are, but I need to separate and bring this back for non-residential uses. You've got a 6 foot height limit and a 14 feet in height. And if Bill Clark is okay with that, I don't necessarily feel comfortable potentially going for the sign to be bigger because of the residents inside the subdivision.
Sybil?
All right, I'm not a guy. Tell me, what is the size of these signs?
Those are just provided as examples.
I understand they're samples, but I
Yeah.
want to try to figure out what 64 or 84 square feet is. I want to get an idea. This gives me an idea. So
So if you go look into, I will send you an email on what that looks like.
Because
I'm trying
I
to think of
find-
an example I have
Those
in
are signs
town.
that he says he doesn't want to use. Those are signs that he wants to use.
I know, but that's a completely different thing. I'm just trying to figure out the size of signs.
Well, if a
All right,
sign
that's all.
is
So this one to me is offensive. This one is not.
well,
Now, what is the
Well, they
difference?
could be both the same size,
they could
too.
both say
I
that.
don't think so.
Well, it depends
But-
on how the picture's taken.
That's true.
I mean, a 10 by 10 is 100.
Right. But normally they're not that way. So like a sign that's 5 foot high, person height,
Mhm.
let's say 5 to 6 feet high. So someone standing up to be 64 feet would be, 10 feet. So it's like double. You got a person standing up and a person, 2 people lying down. That's about
Yeah.
the size
Or
of
you
the
could say
sign.
64 feet is 8 by 8. Well, that's
Yeah,
not
but
very
they're
big.
usually never
That's-
square, not too
Oh.
often. They're usually rectangular.
For
I
lettering, that's
understand
very
that,
big.
but I'm still saying this is the amount of space we're giving them, or we are allowing them.
For lettering,
For lettering.
64
Yeah.
square feet.
I
I think we're I guess somewhat muddying the waters a little bit, and maybe overcomplicating a complicated task. I will. It's up to the pleasure of the board. I can, if we want to bring this back to the March meeting, if that's what you would like me to do, if that's what y'all are thinking, I will separate non-residential uses out. Look at the definition of a sign for monument. And the intent with this was to allow monument signs for, not, I want to just repeat this because I know it sounded repetitive, allow for signage for non-residential uses in residential zoning districts
For each use.
for each use.
And I think the board has a consensus that we agree with that.
Okay.
That what we don't want to have is a situation that is unfair. The sanctuary comes to mind. They've got three major entrances, and they want to put signs out front that designate that subdivision so they can market their homes. We
Sure.
want them to have a reasonable size.
Sure. I think,
However, we're going to rewrite of course, Article 6 is probably not going to be, or Section 11 is probably not going to, we're not going to get to that for a good year when in the rewrite of the UDO. So we have to have something that's going to last us the next 18 months or 2 years and be fair to all the developers.
yes, and I think we are looking at, I mean, I've not had any complaints or really anything as far as the entrance signs. I think it's good the way they've written. I know that if you look at the signs that are in Citros right now for Eastwood Bluffs and Birdwatch, I think you'll look at those and you'll see probably about what they're allowed to do because they have been permitted for that because it's subdivision within a subdivision. So they're allowed. I think our focus needs to be on these monument signs on how we move forward, and I'll fix the corrections and bring them back.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah.
All right, we beat this horse.
And I guess
Yeah.
maybe just to clarify, are we okay I think we're okay on the directional signs, right?
Yes. Are we okay with that?
That seems reasonable. And the lighting part, paragraph 2.
I am lighting.
I want some, and this may be in the UDO, is the issue of digital signage.
Yes, digital signage is already discussed, and I want to, if you brought that up, so I will touch base on that. It says prohibited signs, and it says electric message centers, digitally animated signs.
What definition is that under?
So it's section 11.4, in the UDO, it says prohibited signs. These following signs are prohibited. And electric message centers / digitally animated signs are in that category.
Well, we also prohibit in this wording internal lighting for a sign, and a digital sign is
By its
internally
very nature,
lit
internal.
because it's a message board of sorts. It's a light that is a part of the sign as opposed to a light that is projected onto the sign, which
Yeah,
we
they-
allow.
Very different. But yeah, I mean, when I think of digital sign, you got the scrolling, you got the digital. It's all digital. It's all LED. The other one is illumination for that sign to be visible at nighttime.
Dustin, didn't we make Walgreens take down their digital sign? We gave them like 6 months to, yes. I don't know if anybody's aware of that, but they used to have it's a small ground mounted sign, but it was digital.
Okay.
And it flashed,
Yeah.
get your vaccine shots.
Yeah.
It wasn't vaccine.
Yeah, there's one complication to this. Some digital animated signage is done through an external projector that then projects the image onto the monument sign. So sounds like by that definition, it's external light. It's an external lighting source. Might that?
I mean, if I got a complaint on that, I'd look at it. And
It says digitally animated signs are not allowed.
yeah,
Right, but there's two ways that you have digitally animated signs. One of which is it's a screen that's internal to the device.
right.
Other digital signs are actually a screen and there's a projector
Yeah, which I
that
would,
is external
Yeah.
that then projects digital information onto that screen.
I would view that in the same category. It's not
Okay.
allowed
I'm not sure
unless
the language will
Yeah.
allow that.
unless it was.
But anyway,
I think the only allowance for that really is you see these around Christmas time. The people use
Right.
these light bulbs now that can project holiday
Snowflakes and-
decorations on
yeah.
their
Okay.
home. So,
so you
um,
don't think there's an issue with that? We got it covered. Great.
All right. I'd like to have a motion. Do we need a motion to have it go back to staff? I'd like to entertain a motion that with the items that we've discussed, both in overall signage, size, in size of the lettering area, and whether one or more uses within a subdivision are going to be allowed, staff is going to go back and reword that and bring it at our next meeting.
I would so move with the caveat that we acknowledge the difficulty of this and Chad's good work in trying to get this solved.
Do we
I
have a
so
second?
move.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm not going to be at the next meeting, so
Mr. Chair, before we go into new business, can I make a odd request that we take a 3-minute recess for me to make a phone call?
yes.
Yeah.
How about we'll have a bio break that'll take us till 10:15.
Okay.
Alan, is that okay? We just took a temporary recess for a phone call, but no business was discussed. Now we're getting back into our agenda. Item number 7 under new business, approval of site development plan, Shoreline Building Incorporated. Chad, can you start us off with that?
Sure. This is a Shoreline Building Incorporated applicant on behalf of H&T of Ocean Isle, which is the owner, is requesting the approval of a new construction retail center. The retail center will consist of 3 lease units. There are 51 parking spaces proposed in this accordance with the total square footage of the retail center, total of 47 space. Sorry, let me read that again. The retail center will consist of 3 lease units. The gross area of the retail center is 9,202 square feet. There are 51 parking spaces proposed in accordance with the total square footage of the retail center. Of a total of 47 spaces are required, so it does meet that. The retail center is required to meet the standards of section 6.07 at 5-F. The overlay districts, the proposed colors, bike rack, sidewalks, landscaping have all been met in the overlay district standards as well. I want to make a point. I wanted to make a phone call to just clarify something. The applicant is not here. The applicant is not required to be here. It's suggested but not required. We can move forward with approving or disapproving the project, or board has the approval to disapprove, approve, or table. I'm not advocating for either one, but obviously if there's questions for the applicant that he obviously cannot answer because he's here, then the March meeting might come into play here. And I'll turn it back over to the chair. I can answer any questions you might have, but if there's questions for the applicant, I think it's fair because, and I just found out this morning he would not be here. He's out of town. I did leave him a message. He knew about the meeting. Something happened, but I just want to be fair to everybody involved, that this does meet standards to staff level. But obviously, if the board, anybody up here has questions for the applicant can't be. The applicant's not here, so therefore there's no representation for those questions. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Larkin.
The chair just has really one point. On the first page under the applicant overview, it gives a Brunswick County parcel number.
Yes.
And I believe we need to add 03 on the end of that because there are 3 different properties that have the same building number, parcel number.
Okay.
The Outfitters that's there now, the dollar store that's there now, and then this in between.
Right.
And the last 2 digits of 03 designate the very specific property.
All right. Let me double check that right now. So I will. Yeah, it looks like I will be agreeing with you because I used the. Sorry for the confusion of that. I used the parcel number that was given to me. You're correct, 02603. So
Okay, thank you. For clarification, it is my understanding that even though this is architecturally going to be somewhat similar to the present Outfitters that's there, and there may be some common ownership, that this is a complete individual submittal.
On a completely individual property.
This does not bootstrap onto anything that was approved or disapproved.
The only thing it's going to
Outfitters.
bootstrap on, and that's why Dustin is here, is the entrance, and that is going to be up to DOT. I have conveyed this project over to DOT for comments. DOT permit will have to be updated, not by our requirements, but by DOT's requirements. The road in front, their staff has some questions and comments on for DOT to make sure it's in harmony for what's best with the town as far as deceleration and turn lanes and stuff like that. That will come into play. I don't have those comments. I have not received them back yet. I do want the planning board to be aware of that. It does not bar any hold up on this being approved because it's not required by our ordinance, but is something that DOT is going to require.
And can I ask Dustin a question? You might want to come up to the podium, please. Dustin Graham, our head of the Department of Public Works, department head. The deacceleration lane, which on Sunset Boulevard, that you would use as you were coming into this now complex area, is that deceleration lane going to be constructed by the DOT at the DOT's expense, or is this something that is a part of this process for
I can answer
approval of
that.
this?
I can answer that. So the DOT will require the developer to install something in accordance with what DOT approves.
Okay.
So the developer will have to pay for it.
Thank you. It leads to the second question. There's a 4,474 square foot rectangular area that is really right in front of the dollar store, but it's out at the street line. And it's an NCDOT dedicated right of way. I don't understand what that is for. Is that possibly another deceleration lane or acceleration lane for the future?
It's
with the first go around was the when they DOT was going to make them put in turning lane here. They dedicated that section to DOT at the time. So I don't know what DOT, they just decided to give it to them for a turning lane onto Station Trail. Because at one time they were looking at putting a putt where Dollar General was at one time. So this was all designed at that time when the Outfitters was designed and brought forth. It's all captured all of it at one time.
Okay. So that dedicated right of way, then, you're saying should not necessarily come into play in our evaluation of this particular development section.
No, the only thing that's going to come into play on this for DOT, if you look at the drawing, is where they got it hashed out at for this deceleration. When they widen out the road, they have got it hashed out in front of Station Trail. So basically, it's just like when you come to Station Trail, you're not supposed to turn into Station Trail. You better go to the turning lane and turn in. So you're just going to put a driveway. You'd be turning into Outfitters and that new driveway, or the driveway that's there now, then come down and go through Dollar General to get back on Station Trail.
Yes.
So that's the concern is that all that traffic is going to have to turn into there and go through the Dollar General to get back on Station Trail. You won't be able to make the turn on the Station Trail like you do now.
See, it doesn't designate that on these drawings, though, that is in fact a issue.
Yeah, there is. If you look at the drawings up there in the top of the wider road, not in the hash mark where it says DOT dedicated, on
Okay.
the other section.
It's
in
this
the
one
road.
right here.
Yep.
Okay, I see the thermoplastic pavement overlay. Yeah, it's direction. It's forcing cars because of paint on the roadway.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So you both get into the turning lane.
You can't come out of Station Trail and take a left then.
no. There's a barrier, right?
Yeah, you can come out and make a left, just like pulling out here in
Okay.
the driveway here, but you're not supposed to make the right in there because you're about to go into the turning lane. By going to the turning lane, you got to go into the driveway.
Okay.
That's there now
All right.
by Outfitters. So they got it hashed out. So basically, when you come up to there, you're supposed to go into the new lane, turn into the driveway, then come down, then go through Dollar General's parking lot to get on Station Trail the way they got it designed right now.
Now, was this all known by Dollar General, by the dollar store, when they in fact built that?
I don't know.
There's a current stub out.
But that's all. But that's only if you get into the acceleration lane. If you stay in the regular lane, you can still make the normal right on the Station Trail.
Well, it's just like here at town that you got it right here in front of town hall the same way. This driveway right here, they got it hashed out before you get there. Some people do turn into there, but you're supposed to go down to the turning lane and turn into Pineview to come in.
And
what-
this is the part where staff will have to get with the applicant and
Yeah.
DOT separately to work this out and see what DOT comes back with for design, because
Yeah.
ultimately is their road. They're going to have to figure it out what they want to allow for the upgrade for this driveway permit. The question you have, I think you're alluding to, is that Dollar General does have a stub out to that because of the overlay district. We do require
Yes,
connectivity.
connectivity, like we do here.
Yep.
This
Mhm.
connectivity was the same thing in our
So,
parking lot.
And they're going
and
to connect.
I know.
so-
Yeah.
So this was the concern that I had with Chad about this, to get with DOT about this. if they're going to do this, because actually you better go into that. And like I said, you can come out and make a left, but
Who knows when they're
all
going
the
to do it?
people, yeah. But then you got the voting every 2 years is going to take place. There's going to be a lot of traffic going through there and going through making the turn. So this, so I brought it up that we need to look at this when this is done or getting ready to do this.
Richard?
Yeah, again, as a neophyte here, I mean, in terms of the lag between if we approve this, it's built. I mean, when can we expect NCDOT to amend the roadway in that
So
section?
it will be up to the, I mean, again, I want to emphasize that because our unified development ordinance does not specifically state that we require a DOT permit to be had. This is kind of where the experience and wherewithal comes in, is like DOT has to play a part in this because they're connecting to a DOT road. They will be required more by DOT, by an outside agency, to upgrade their permit. In this case, staff has an interest on how that design is going to go to make sure we don't have a deceleration lane and hashed out in front of an existing road instead of a driveway. Staff, I mean, this bars no, really can't disapprove this project because of that, and I want to make that clear. But also, staff will have the conversation, and I've already sent this project to DOT to get comments for the applicant on how they are to proceed with this moving forward, and that will initiate the conversation between staff, DOT, and the applicant on how to manage our way through this.
So as we look at this, then, that really is outside the purview of what
Right.
we're
Correct.
looking at as
But
regards
Dustin
to
does
our
bring up a
UDO.
good point. You know, he brought this up to me this past week. It's just a conversation that the staff, DOT, and the applicant is going to have to, more between staff and DOT, is like, hey, here's our concern. Please take this into consideration as you design this on how to allow them to upgrade a permit.
Because of public safety.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I
Richard?
guess I have a question, again, as a neophyte. I mean, shouldn't, because what it sounds like, this is now being laid at the feet of staff, when it, frankly, from my viewpoint, should be laid at the feet of the developer. In other words, if you want the planning board to approve this, you have to show us that the appropriate measures have been taken and DOT is engaged and that this process is going forward. The way it sounds now is the developer can require of staff to go to NCDOT and make what they've proposed happen. Am I wrong here?
Not really. I take it upon myself to send these out to outside TRC comments out to outside agencies such as Stormwater, Brunswick County Stormwater, In-State Stormwater, CAMA, DCM, and DOT, in case they have any comments. The only thing that's required in our UDO is make sure it meets the standards of the UDO.
Right.
But knowing that state stormwater, which is not a requirement of us, it's a requirement of state, has to have an approval for, and such as this one, because it's connecting to a DOT road. I really do that on behalf, for the applicant, just to provide them everything up front. It's really up to the developer to get with DOT to make sure that they got all their ducks in a row.
The reason I asked the initial question about what this rectangular hashed out area is for NCDOT dedicated right-of-way is it's the continuity of our sidewalk that goes all the way through there is in that area. And so are the electric boxes that are out there now. That's been a thorn in our side for that sidewalk delineation for years now. I also don't like the way, it's not the right text. I also am uncomfortable with the way the sidewalk keyholes around the electric boxes, because I will guarantee you that if I'm walking my dog, I am not going to walk that loop. I'm going to walk right through the electric boxes. And then there'll be a path, and that's where everybody will walk. It's almost like we're encouraging people to walk by the electric boxes. And but I don't know that is, again, within the purview of, it's not violating the UDO.
Correct. So
question.
Go ahead, Sybil.
Sybil.
So am I understanding what you're saying to us? This is not something we need to add into our UDO, that all of these things are required for the building?
It's
It's
required.
just because the state requires it, so we just sort of sit back and wait.
Correct.
That's what I wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah, they show that looping sidewalk, which I could, which is
Unless you put-
goofy at the best, but
Unless you put a barrier there of some sort, a planter or something, people are going to walk right through there. But Richard, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess, what, again, as a neophyte, it seems like we're starting to create a list of things that we need to address in the UDO. I'm not convinced that we have something that, because what I hear all the time is the issue of people making left and right hand turns out of whatever, post office. I mean, the sanctuary has put its driveway right across the street from the post office entrance, and I'm curious to see how that's going to be resolved when they start to have residents in there. But I'm uncomfortable with, okay, we can trust NCDOT and the developer to figure this out and do it. And is there something that we should consider in terms of inserting in the UDO that gives us some leverage in terms of requiring that all the necessary steps have been taken before we put our faith in strangers or other institutions that may or may not get to it or not? Because it seems like, at least in my, having been here since '91, that those things tend to lag and create some very dangerous traffic situations, particularly on that road. I mean, I've seen at least 4 head-on collisions that were basically due to the absence of a deceleration lane or a turnoff lane.
One of the things that staff has had experience with in the past and is going to have the conversation with this board and as we comb through the UDO is what allowances do we bring in for requirements of a complete submittal when we get into these subdivisions and site development projects.
Great.
Like a traffic study.
If it triggers it, yes. TIA study, which that would be something that DOT requires if it triggers it. State stormwater permits to be completely, turned in before, as a complete application, stuff like that. That would be the as far as we could go with it. We could potentially look at requiring a DOT permit to be approved before this comes before the board or before the board can approve it, or staff could approve it as a permit. But it is still up to DOT. I mean, it's just going to be a permit issued in accordance to the developer. Hey, we've reached out to DOT. They've given us the permit, and this is what they're going to require us to do as far as design. Well, can we get into those design standards? Not necessarily. Staff will have the conversation with DOT. This is our concern, but ultimately it comes down to what DOT, because it is their road, what they're going to require as a design to move forward on that street.
Let me ask a question that hits right on that. The Phase 2 stormwater drainage system that is behind the existing outfitters, it says was designed to accept the stormwater from Phase 2, which we're looking at Phase 2 now. I would ask of staff, are we sure that that in fact is the case? Has Brunswick County looked at this, because they manage the stormwater plans? Has Brunswick County looked at this and said, yes, that initial stormwater drainage system for Phase 1 is large enough to accommodate Phase 2?
So I'm going to answer the question the same way I just did the DOT thing, twofold. One, it's going to probably trigger state stormwater permit that they'll have to pull from the state.
Okay.
And county has provided comments through the TRC process on this to what they're going to require for Brunswick County stormwater.
Okay.
And then the applicant, it's going to be up to the applicant to fulfill those.
Once they come back with a permit, though, then we're satisfied. Because all of the stormwater drainage is not going into that stormwater detention behind Phase 1. A lot of it's going into the stormwater pond that's directly behind Dollar Store.
And if they come up, sorry to interrupt, it's one of those things where if they come back with an engineered plan that is approved by the state and the county, regardless of where,
That's it.
that's it.
So what you're saying is if they satisfies those two requirements,
We're good.
we have no
Think so.
All right,
Say.
Dustin, thank you.
Oh,
Unless you have
thanks.
something to add that we might benefit from.
Nope. That's it.
Thank you
That's
for-
all the concern I had was the turning lane.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Does anybody on the board have any specific comments about the submittal for the retail center, Sunset Boulevard?
Yeah, I have one question. Do we have any guidance on what kinds of properties these 3 lease units will become?
And we have no.
I do know, I've been told that they're retail, and that's where the table uses will come in. It would be, you have 3 lease spaces in an MB1 zoning district. So if you look at the table uses in Article 6, you look at all the uses under MB1, if it falls into that category.
Okay.
And some of them have standards, some of them don't, some of them have special use. That's where it might get tricky, but that's another rabbit hole for another day.
So we can be
Well,
sure
Well,
that
if the
it's not
applicant
3
were here,
tattoo
I'm
parlors in a
sorry.
row.
Go ahead, Pete.
Say that again.
We can be sure that it's not 3 tattoo parlors in a row,
We hope, well, I
because
mean,
that wouldn't be allowed.
What about the ones that's,
yes. So
Jerry?
Yeah, there's one thing that looking at this, the Department of Energy is going to be supplying a lot of monies to retail space or to governments. I would suggest on the plan that at least would show electric charging stations.
that's going to
Not-
be
not necessarily have to do it,
right.
but as long as it's on the plan, he might be eligible for some monies coming
I
back.
think that's a valid request and suggestion. We can't enforce it because it's not in the UDO, and that's where the applicant not being
Yeah.
here. That's where the applicant not being here, not being able to answer that question, type thing.
Even during construction, if you had the conduit already laid in there, and so if he gets money for it, he can usually access it.
Yeah.
So it's just a suggestion.
And a very good one, too.
Good one, yes.
be a good suggestion to make?
Just
Sybil, anything? Here?
No.
Just a
Ron.
couple of cleanup questions. I see on your, I guess, LMO, have those been items taken care of? Signs must be submitted and approved by separate permit process?
I have not gotten an application for a sign yet.
Okay, and then on O, some question about,
If there's any wetlands, no, I don't think. I think if there were, they'd be labeled, and I think that's where.
They are labeled on the
Yeah.
drawing.
Yeah, if you go to the second to last page of let's see here, the proposed conditions, existing conditions, you'll see some existing wetlands
okay,
that
so
are
they've
not being.
satisfied that?
Yep.
Okay. I think that the rest, I couldn't see any, other than that, then no other questions.
Anything else?
No, I guess, we're going to vote to approve or not approve this. I mean, I think I'd be more comfortable if we had the applicant here to answer a few questions, but.
Well, I agree. And seeing how we don't have the requirement that the applicant.
You don't, but if there are questions that you have of the applicant to where that needs to be asked to approve this project, then this can be tabled until March where the applicant can be here so those questions can be asked.
Might suggest staff give us some coaching. Did you hear anything that we discussed that staff would be more comfortable tabling it?
I'm fine either way. It's totally up to the pleasure of the board.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see.
Yeah, I think, Pete's, the issue of the sidewalk, to me, I would like to see that resolved. I'm not sure if there's.
I don't know if we can. It does meet the intention of the ordinance. A sidewalk is, 5 or 6 feet in length, has to be there. I know the problem we're going to get into that is Problem with the applicant is we didn't install those electrical boxes that I'm pretty sure the county or
They don't
BMC
belong to
did.
us. Yeah.
So
They're
how you get around it, no pun intended, is it is going to be kind of a difficult question to ask.
But so I guess in reading everything, this submittal at this point complies with the UDO.
Correct.
I couldn't see anything where it doesn't comply with the UDO, including the overlay. You've been through the overlay
I
district.
have
Yes, I looked
So-
at that too.
the colors.
I mean, it's nice to ask questions and get some additional information. There's nothing we can impose on this development that isn't already in here.
Correct. And now you can impose something that is voluntary, so such as the electric charging stations. You can request the applicant, hey, would you be willing to do this? He can accept it or he could deny it. You know, it's totally up to
Can we make that statement on Jerry's behalf, on the board's behalf, to the applicant as not as a caveat, but as a
It can't be
conversation piece,
it could not be a condition.
right?
But I can forward the comment to him and say, hey, would you be willing to do this? It doesn't bar anything on your approval or denial. It's just, hey, this is a thought of the planning board.
I wouldn't be surprised if he wouldn't jump at that. Too.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
And we might we add to that some way of masking and preventing the walkthrough in terms of the electrical outlets through landscaping
we
or
can-
something like that?
Now we can do that too.
Okay.
all right. I'd like to entertain a motion to accept for approval of the site development plan for Shoreline Building Incorporated that's now before us.
I so move.
Can we have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye. And can we create a motion to add the suggestion of the addition of the and I'm not sure how we word this. This is
If
a
you just want
request
to,
rather than a requirement.
yeah, if you just want to make the motion I had staff forward the comment of the sidewalk around the electrical boxes
Right.
and the electrical charging stations be forwarded to the applicant
Please.
as suggestions for a project.
Okay. I so move.
I second.
All in favor?
Oh, hold on. I can't make that motion, so somebody
Okay.
needs to make that motion.
Okay.
I'm
I'll make
making the
that
motion
motion.
that we add.
What he said.
Okay, what Chad said. The request that the developer consider adding. How many stations do we want? 3?
Well, just
No.
just say station.
Okay, add charging stations to the proposed parking lot and to amend the landscaping around the electrical to prevent egress from the sidewalks. Okay, I make that motion.
And I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. All right. Now that we're through with new business 7, we have public comments, and seeing none present.
Before you adjourn, I have a staff comment, a couple of them.
Okay.
One,
We need to add that on the agenda.
yes,
It should have been
and,
done.
and I'm probably somewhat breaking a rule, but this is important. It needs to be because this is a motion I need from the board. The February 17th meeting, which will be the first UDO meeting with Wes, coming up in 2 weeks from today.
At 2 p.m.
So that's the motion we need.
Yes.
Currently, that meeting is at 9 o'clock. I need a motion to move that meeting and that meeting only for right now to 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Can we do that?
Mm.
Okay.
I
move-
asked you about it individually,
Oh,
but
okay.
I need a motion to make it official.
I move that we move the February 17th meeting to 2 p.m. from 9 a.m.
Can I ask the forbearance of the board for just 1 minute? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that
I
had come
second.
out. That had come out in an email, but you might not have gotten the email.
Yep.
Yeah.
Seconded by Richard. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And there'll be a public notice about that.
Yes.
What was your second thing?
Forgot.
And do we have, we'll get an agenda packet that clarifies what part of the UDO we're going to
Yep.
start with.
They maybe
All right.
have that we got at the February 3rd meeting since they weren't here from Wes.
Yeah, and I can forward them that information. I remember what my second point was now. So the March 3rd meeting, as of right now, the only thing that will be on it will be the sign amendment coming back to you. So
we have nothing, no submittals from citizens or applicants.
correct. I have nothing in TRC for this month of February.
Would you, never mind, I don't need to write statement.
I guess this is a general question and a specific question.
Okay.
Because in those cases, we have one, and I guess that's just always been a burden to me. On the agenda, so on the March 3rd agenda, we have the signs that are gonna
Yep.
come back
Yep.
for review again. And at this time appears nothing else.
Right.
But there seems to be no mechanism for the board to add anything to an agenda. This came up a long time ago.
Came up long. Yeah, correct.
And because then we went through, we made lists. So in those cases, let's say everything goes smoothly, that is the only item on the agenda.
Yep.
Is there no mechanism where we could look back at our previous list to say, here's something that we could actually discuss on that meeting?
So answer your question twofold. One, where you can approve or amend the agenda, you could add that as an agenda item as long as it passes the board's vote.
But that comes down to doing it at the meeting.
Correct.
But that's like a waste of time because nobody has any information.
Correct.
There is, as far as I can tell, and there's no mechanism to say like a week before, here's the proposed agenda. Say a week before on whatever it is, February 28th. Here's the agenda, proposed agenda for March 3rd meeting. It has one item. And somebody says, well, looking back at our list, we had something could we add. By doing it at the meeting, it's a waste of time because nobody has no information.
And then the answer to that, and the second part of that is going through the agenda or the UDO rewrite audit process. That's where I would want those to be addressed.
Isn't most everything we had on the list something that we're going to be dealing with in the UDO?
I don't know. I don't remember the list anymore. I had
Yeah.
like 20. I had like 20 items,
Yeah.
and there were some things that got nixed because of the
Wes-
current legal situation.
Wes has the future agenda items list that was created by the
Oh, I guess,
previous
okay.
board.
So you're telling me there's no mechanism to do it except at the meeting,
I mean,
the way it's currently written,
I mean,
which is fine. I'm okay with that if that's
yeah.
the rule.
So I mean, if you could amend it at the meeting to say, hey, Chairman, I'd like to add to the agenda. I want to talk about parking spaces on the island. Can we add that to new business number 2? And it would be up to the board to say, yeah, we can amend the draft and then have that discussion. Ultimately, it's going to lead to staff doing research and bringing something back.
I thought originally Lisa had a problem with that because that agenda then was not what was advertised. You can move things
I mean,
around,
it gets
but adding stuff
confusing
that wasn't advertised to the public.
when you look at. I mean, the planning staff. That's the way I'd want to do it.
So I guess then what I'm saying is we need to include something in our administrative UDO part. To me, it seems like the smart thing to include something where a planning board person can suggest something added to the agenda and then supply the backup information. Otherwise, it seems like time management's an issue, right? I mean, if we come on March 3rd and we're done in 10 minutes, it's kind of a stupid use. Well, not a stupid use. An inefficient use of. If we could get something in and use our time more smartly, we might get more done. That's all I'm saying.
I agree with Ron, and I agree with Chad especially. We can come into a meeting and add something to the agenda at the start of the meeting. However, the point Ron brings up is a very valid one, that making decisions without the citizens having the opportunity to know that we were going to talk about that is not the transparent way we want to operate. However, it gives us the opportunity, and this sign regulation is a perfect example of that the planning board could have brought that before ourselves, saying, hey, we're seeing new development, we need to have these signs, we need to develop this, but not deliberating or not deciding anything, but what we are doing is we're kind of scoping it and briefly, and then putting it on the agenda for the next meeting by vote of council.
And I think going back to touching what Ron as far as the time management part, there's just no fast way to potentially do this.
When you have opportunities to use time, it's already too late. It's
Yeah.
what it's sounding like to me.
But we can bring it up. We just
Yeah.
can't, in fairness to the community, we can't deliberate or make
Now,
decisions
what you
without it
could
being
do
advertised in
now,
advance.
what
That
you
would be
could
unfair.
do is, and again, this is if Ron brought, hey, I have all these attachments I've made, you could have staff print them off. You could give them at the meeting, but it's not going to give the planning board a whole time to review it as well. So yes, it can be done. That's the way that the planning staff would want it done. But when it comes down to it, there's just no fast track way to do it. So, and the future agenda item list that was all brought by the previous board, one before this one was completed again, has been forwarded to the COG as considerations into the UDO rewrite.
Okay. All right.
Then I guess
and-
one more thing. Since we have some new members, can the new members get a copy of that list?
Sure, I will send it out.
That'd be great.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, you're fine. If seeing no more comments from the board, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
I
I
Aye.
The